My name is Dan, and I am breaking a promise to myself by writing this down. For the last 6 months, I've tried to bury it, to pretend the whole thing was a stress-induced hallucination, a bad trip that overstayed its welcome. But it's no use. It's in the back of my mind every time I close my eyes, a splinter in my soul festering in the dark. It all started with a video file, and it ended with something else. It began, as these things often do, with boredom and a reckless curiosity. I'm a video editor by trade, mostly corporate nonsense, and the occasional passion project for a local band. The work pays the bills, but it's creatively sterile. To stave off the numbness, I'd sometimes wander the darker corners of the internet, looking for weird, unexplained footage, the kind of stuff that feels off even before anything happens. It was a digital palate cleanser. That's how I found the post on a forum dedicated to lost media. The user, who went by the handle Static Ghost, was asking for help. They'd acquired a hard drive from a garage sale, and on it was a single video file titled only finalproof.move. They claimed they couldn't open it with any conventional software. It would just crash the media player or display a screen of churning black and white static. They'd managed to pull a single frame from the file's metadata, a blurry greyish smear that they'd posted. It was utterly unremarkable, but something about Static Ghost's plea felt genuine, desperate even. I can hear it, they'd written in their last post. Even with the file closed, it's a whisper just under the floorboards. It's counting backwards from 10. The thread was a graveyard of mockery. People called them a LARPer, an attention seeker. The post was a week old, and Static Ghost had not replied. Their profile was now listed as inactive. A challenge. That's what I told myself. My editing rig is a beast, capable of handling raw 8K footage without breaking a sweat. If this file was so corrupted, so stubborn, I wanted to be the one to crack it. It was the digital equivalent of a locked room mystery. I private messaged the inactive account, half expecting no reply. To my surprise, I got an email an hour later from a burner account with a download link and no message. Just the link. The file was large, just over 4 gigs. It took a few minutes to download. I remember the feeling in my room, the familiar hum of my PC, the glow of my monitors, the late-night city sounds muffled by my window. It all felt so normal. I had no idea I was about to shatter that normality forever. The file was indeed named final_proof.mov. I tried VLC first. The window opened, stayed black for a second, and then crashed to desktop. No error message. I tried Media Player Classic. Same thing. I opened my professional editing suite, Premiere Pro. It recognized the file, but when I dragged it onto the timeline, the entire program froze solid, forcing a hard restart. Now I was annoyed. This was a personal affront to my technical prowess. I decided to get under the hood. I opened a hex editor and loaded the file. The raw data was a mess. The header was mangled, but not in a way I'd ever seen before. It was as if the code had been chewed on. Bits and pieces of standard formatting were there, but they were twisted, woven around sequences of repeating, non-standard values that looked like digital scar tissue. And in the middle of it all, clear as day in ASCII text, was a string of words. He sees you when the numbers end. A chill, the first genuine one, trickled down my spine. This wasn't just corruption. This was intentional. Someone had built a trap into this file. It took me 2 days. 2 days of writing custom scripts, of isolating and bypassing the corrupted sections of the code, of rebuilding the container from scratch. It was exhausting, meticulous work. During that time, I started to feel watched. It was a primal sensation, the kind you feel in the woods when you know that something is standing just beyond the tree line, its eyes on your back. I'd spin around in my office chair, expecting to see a shape in the doorway. There was never anything there, just the empty hall, the familiar shadows of my apartment. I blamed it on sleep deprivation and caffeine jitters. Finally, on the second night, my script finished running. It had created a new, stable version of the file. I'd named it decrypted_final.mov. My heart was hammering against my ribs. This was it, the big reveal. I expected a hoax, maybe a jump scare, GIF, or just an hour of that same churning static. I took a deep breath, double-clicked. The video player opened. The screen was black for a 3 count. Then, an image resolved. It was a bedroom. Not a dungeon, not a crypt. A perfectly ordinary, slightly messy bedroom. The camera was static, as if placed on a dresser or a shelf. The quality was poor, standard definition, with a timestamp burning in the bottom right corner. 23/14/08/10/17/2004. The color palette was muted, bathed in the sickly green glow of an old alarm clock. In the center of the frame was a single bed, and in the bed, a man was sleeping. He was maybe in his late 20s, with short brown hair. Lying on his side, his back to the camera. The room was unremarkable. A cluttered desk, a band poster on the wall. I couldn't make out which one. A pile of clothes on a chair. For the first 15 minutes, nothing happened. Just a man sleeping. The only sound was the faint, regular hiss of the tape and the occasional soft sigh or rustle from the sleeper. It was profoundly, mind-numbingly boring. I felt a surge of disappointment. This was it? This was the final proof. Some guy's home movie. I was about to close it, to write the whole thing off as a waste of time, when I noticed the shadow. It was subtle at first, a deepening of the darkness in the far corner of the room, opposite the bed. The corner was already dark, but this was different. This was a darkness that seemed to swallow the light around it. It wasn't cast by anything in the room. It was a presence, a stain. I leaned forward, my nose almost touching the screen. The shadow began to move. It didn't slide or creep. It unfolded. It peeled itself away from the corner, rising into a tall, slender shape that defied geometry. It had no discernible features, no face, no limbs in the conventional sense. It was a man-shaped void, a cutout of absolute nothingness in the fabric of the video. My breath caught in my throat. This was no hoax. The quality was too grimy, too real. The special effect, if it was one, was like nothing I'd ever seen. There was no CGI shimmer, no telltale artifacts. It just was. The figure stood at the foot of the bed, motionless. The sleeping man stirred, as if sensing a shift in the atmosphere. He rolled onto his back, still asleep. The figure then began to move around the side of the bed. Its motion was all wrong. It didn't walk. It seemed to glide, but in a series of tiny, rapid, stuttering movements, like a damaged film reel. One moment it was at the foot, the next it was halfway along the side. Its progression a blink and you miss it series of jumps. It stopped right beside the sleeping man. For a long, agonizing minute, it simply stood there, looming over him. The only sound was the hiss of the tape and the man's soft, rhythmic breathing. Then, the figure tilted its head. It was a small, bird-like gesture, but it was filled with an alien and predatory curiosity. It began to lean down. It didn't bend at the waist. Its entire upper body inclined towards the man's face in a single, rigid unit, until its head, or the space where its head should be, was hovering mere inches from the man's. And then the man's eyes snapped open. He wasn't looking at the figure. He was staring straight up at the ceiling. His eyes wide with a terror so absolute it was paralyzing. He knew it was there. He was frozen, unable to move, unable to scream, his body locked in a state of pure, petrified dread. The figure remained there, its face hovering over his, and then a sound started. It was a low, wet, rattling whisper, like air being forced through a clogged drain. It was barely audible over the tape hiss, but I could make out the words. It was counting, backwards. 10. The man's eyes widened further, the whites glowing in the dim light. A single tear traced a path down his temple and into his hairline. 9. His fingers, lying limp on the blanket, began to twitch, a spastic, involuntary tremor. 8. A low moan escaped his lips, a sound of utter despair. 7. The figure raised one of its arms. It wasn't a hand. It was a long, tapered appendage that ended in points too fine to be fingers. 6. The points gently, almost lovingly, touched the man's forehead. 5. The man's body went rigid, his back arched, his mouth stretched open in a silent scream. 4. The points pressed deeper. I could see the skin of his forehead dimple under the pressure. 3. The whisper was louder now, more insistent, filling the room. The very air in the video seemed to thicken, to vibrate with a malevolent frequency. 2. The man's silent scream found its voice. It was a choked, guttural sound, ripped from the very core of his being. His eyes were rolling back in his head. 1. The figure went perfectly still. The whispering stopped. The room was silent, except for the man's ragged, hitching breaths. He was staring, wide-eyed, at the thing above him. He was waiting. The figure spoke a final word. Not a whisper this time, but a clear, cold, digital-sounding word that seemed to be inserted directly into the audio track, bypassing the room's atmosphere entirely. 0. And then the man dissolved. It's the only word I have for it. It wasn't a death. It was an unmaking. His body didn't vanish or turn to dust. It seemed to de-res like a corrupted image on a screen. His form broke apart into 1,000,000 pixels of grey static, which were then sucked violently into the chest of the dark figure. It happened in less than a second. One moment he was a man, a living, breathing human being. The next, there was nothing on the bed but a rumpled blanket and a slowly settling indent where he had been. The figure straightened up. It seemed fuller, more substantial. It turned its head, and for the first time, it looked directly into the camera. It had no eyes, but I felt its gaze. It was a physical pressure on my own face, a coldness seeping through the screen. It saw me. It saw Dan, in his apartment, 20 years in its future, watching its feeding. Then, the video ended. The screen went black. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, my body numb, my mind screaming. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. Sweat soaked my shirt. I had just witnessed a murder. No, not a murder, a consumption, a deletion. I slammed my laptop shut, my hands shaking so badly I could barely manage it. I stumbled into my bathroom and vomited into the sink. The image was burned onto the back of my eyelids, the man's terrified eyes, the dissolving static, the final, knowing look from the thing in the shadows. This was hours ago, I tried to call a friend, but my voice was a ragged croak. I couldn't form the words. How could I possibly explain? He'd think I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. I finally managed to fall into a fitful, alcohol-assisted sleep on my couch, the lights blazing. I dreamed of static and of a voice counting down from 10. I woke up this morning hoping it had all been a nightmare, but my laptop was still on the floor where I'd left it, the cooling fan whirring softly. The file was still in my downloads folder. It was real. And that's when the new symptoms started. The feeling of being watched was no longer a vague sensation. It was a constant, oppressive weight. My apartment, once my sanctuary, felt like a cage. The shadows in the corners of my own home seemed deeper, thicker. I'd catch movement in my peripheral vision, a flicker of darkness darting behind a doorframe, a shapeless mass receding into the hallway the moment I turned my head. Then, the whispers began. At first, I thought it was the neighbors, or a TV left on in another room. But it was closer than that. It was right at the edge of my hearing, a sibilant, rasping sound, like radio static tuned between stations. I couldn't make out words. Not at first. I tried to delete the file. I dragged decrypted final.move to the trash and emptied it. I felt a wave of relief. It was gone. I'd purge the hard drive later, do a secure wipe. I went to make coffee, my hands still unsteady. When I came back to my desk, the file was there. On my desktop, same name. My blood ran cold. I deleted it again. I watched the trash icon empty. I refreshed the desktop. It reappeared 5 seconds later. I tried to destroy the data. I used a file shredder program set to the highest level of overwrites. The program ran for 10 minutes, then crashed with an error I'd never seen before. Target is non-corporeal. Non-corporeal. The word echoed in my head. Not of the body, not physical. The file wasn't just on my computer anymore. It was attached to me. It had burrowed into my life like a digital parasite. The whispers grew louder. I started to spend my days in a state of heightened, jangling anxiety. I stopped going out. I stopped answering calls. My work piled up, ignored. I was a prisoner in my own home, a home that was becoming less familiar by the hour. The layout of the room started to feel wrong. Doors seemed to be in slightly different places. The hallway appeared longer at night. The air grew cold in spots, frigid pockets that defied the central heating. One afternoon, exhausted from lack of sleep, I dozed off at my desk. I was jolted awake by the sound of my own name, spoken in that same wet, rattling whisper from the video. It came from right behind my chair. I spun around, screaming, flailing my arms at the empty air. But it wasn't entirely empty. The shadow in the corner of the room was just a little too deep, and for a split second, I saw 2 pinpricks of light in the darkness, like distant, cold stars. They were gone in an instant. The countdown started a week after I first watched the video. I was trying to eat some soup, my stomach a knot of nerves, when I heard it, clear and coming from the living room. 10. It was the same voice from the video, the same digital coldness. I dropped the bowl. It shattered on the kitchen tiles, sending ceramic shards and chicken noodle soup across the floor. I didn't care. I backed into a corner, my eyes darting around, expecting the figure to unfold from the shadows at any moment. Nothing happened. An hour passed. Then 2. The tension was unbearable. It was a ticking time bomb in my mind. The next number came just as I was drifting into a terrified sleep that night. 9. This time, it was closer. It sounded like it was right outside my bedroom door. I spent the rest of the night with my back against the headboard, a baseball bat in my lap, staring at the door, waiting for the handle to turn. The numbers came at random intervals. 8 came 2 days later, whispered from the ventilation shaft. 7 echoed from inside my closed closet the following afternoon. With each number, the presence in my apartment grew stronger, more tangible. The cold spots became more frequent. The distortions in my peripheral vision became more defined. I could now make out the general shape of it. That same tall, slender void. I was unraveling. I knew it. I was living the video. I was the man in the bed, waiting for the countdown to end. 6. From the bathroom mirror as I brushed my teeth, my reflection seemed to flicker. 5. This one was different. It was spoken directly into my ear as I sat watching TV. I felt a gust of frigid, metallic-smelling air. I broke. I called my friend, Mark. I was sobbing, hysterical. I rambled about a video, a shadow, a countdown. He thought I was on drugs. He said he was coming over to just sit tight. But I couldn't sit tight. The end was coming. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones. The air was thick with anticipation. The thing was here, in my apartment, moving through the walls, waiting for its moment. 4. This one came from the speakers of my TV, which was turned off. 3. A synchronized whisper from every electronic device in my home. My phone, my laptop, the microwave. A chorus of dread. I was curled into a ball in the center of my living room floor, rocking back and forth. This was it. Mark would find my apartment empty, just a Dan-shaped void on the carpet. 2. The lights flickered and died. The emergency lights in the hallway cast long, dancing shadows. One of those shadows, in the corner of the living room, did not dance. It stood. It began to unfold. It was here. It glided towards me, its stuttering, impossible motion making my stomach lurch. The room grew deathly cold. The smell of ozone and decay filled my nostrils. It leaned over me, just as it had over the man in the video. The void where its face should be was a bottomless pit, a gateway to some silent, lightless dimension. I looked up into that nothingness. I was the man in the bed. My eyes were wide with the same absolute terror. I was paralyzed. I couldn't even scream. It raised its tapered, pointed hand towards my forehead. And then, a pounding on my front door. Dan! Dan! Are you in there? Open up! It was Mark. The figure froze. Its head, the void, tilted in that same bird-like gesture, but this time it was one of annoyance, of interruption. The pressure in the room lessened by a fraction. The moment was broken. With a sound like tearing silk and shattering glass, the figure fractured. It broke apart into shards of pure darkness that flew in every direction, melting into the walls, the floor, the ceiling. It was gone. The lights flickered back on. I was still on the floor, gasping like a fish out of water. Mark was now kicking the door, yelling that he was going to call the cops. I don't know how I managed to get up and open the door. I must have been in shock. Mark took one look at me, pale, trembling, drenched in sweat, and his anger turned to concern. He got me water, sat me down, and listened as I spilled the whole insane story. He didn't believe me, of course. He thought I was having a psychotic break. He insisted I come stay with him and his wife for a few days. I agreed. I would have agreed to anything to get out of that apartment. I've been at Mark's for 6 months. I never went back to my old place. I left everything. My computer, my clothes, my furniture. I live in his guest room now, a shell of the man I was. The fear is a constant companion. It's less acute now, a dull ache instead of a screaming terror, but it's always there. The thing is, it's not over. The countdown resumed. A month after I moved in, I heard it, whispered from the silent television in the guest room. 1, just 1. The final number. It's been hanging over me for 5 months now. The 0 is coming. I know it is. The thing was interrupted, but it didn't forget. It's patient. It's waiting for the right moment to finish what it started. The distortions have started again here, at Mark's house. The shadows in his hallway are too long. I saw a tall, dark shape standing at the end of his bed last week. Mark and his wife think I'm sleepwalking. They're talking about getting me help. They don't understand. No one can help me. I'm writing this all down now as a warning and as a confession. I shouldn't have poked into things I didn't understand. I shouldn't have been so arrogant. I opened a door and I can't close it. The last 10 seconds of that video, the moment of dissolution, the final look it gave the camera, they haunt me every second of every day. But it's the last 10 seconds of my life that I truly fear, because I know how they will end. I can feel it getting closer. The air is getting cold again. The whispers are becoming clearer. It's almost time for 0. And when it comes, there will be no one to interrupt it.